to Brewing Success, where growth is the mission, change is the reward, and progress is the goal. I am your host, Andrea Gebhardt. I'm a former educator turned passionate entrepreneur whose desire to create impact has never wavered. I have spent the last decade teaching, mentoring, and coaching people on how to create success in their lives and businesses with proven strategies and systems that not only bring about change, but big results. When it comes down to it, teaching is my specialty, leadership is my jam, and inspiring you to live a bigger, fuller life is what I'm all about. This podcast will give you the knowledge and tools you need to brew success in almost any area of your life. You're going to walk away each week feeling inspired, motivated, and ready to step outside your comfort zone and into the next level of who you're meant to be. Now let's get into today's episode. Now, I want you to picture yourself at the top, like the very top of a roller coaster. Not the launch, not the middle, the very top. That final breathless moment before the descent where the car has made its last slow click up the track and the entire world opens up below you. You can see everything from up here. The people on the ground look small. The horizon looks infinite. And after all those slow, grinding clicks upward, there is a rush of arrival that feels extraordinary. You know what most people do at that moment? They let go of the bar and they put their hands up. They throw their hands up. They surrender to the ride. They lean back, open wide, and trust that the momentum of the machine will carry them safely through whatever comes next. And for a moment, for a glorious, exhilarating, wind-in-your-face moment, it feels like the most natural thing in the world. Right up until the first curve hits. Right up until the track bends in a direction you did not anticipate. And the hands that were raised in celebration are suddenly scrambling for the bar that they never should have released. Right up until the loop arrives, the upside down, gravity defying everything that was right side up is now inverted loop. And they realize that holding on was never optional. It was always the requirement. The roller coaster is like momentum. And the bar, the thing your hands should never leave, is the system, the process, the personal production, the leadership discipline, the growth mindset, the habits that got you to the top of the track in the first place. Welcome, you guys, to Brewing Success. I am your host, Andrea Gebhardt, and today we are talking about something that really nobody talks about. It's not about how to build momentum, but really how to navigate it, how to manage it. Because momentum mismanaged is not a victory. It's a temporary thrill followed by a very avoidable crash. And you, the builder, the leader, the person who has done the work to get to the top of that track, you deserve better than that. And you know what? So does your team. You got to keep your hands on the bar. So let's talk about why. Here's the first and most important thing I want you to understand about momentum. Momentum is not a destination. It's not a place you arrive at and then inhabit indefinitely. It's a moment. Momentum is a moment. Momentum is a season. It's a window. It's a temporary condition created by the convergence of your consistent actions, your developing skills, your growing credibility, and the compounding effect of everything that you've been building. Momentum is the reward for the process. It really is what happens when the flywheel, all those individual phases of habit and discipline and consistent showing up, finally reaches a speed where it begins to carry itself. And that feeling, when it arrives, is genuinely extraordinary. Things that felt hard begin to feel easier. Opportunities that seem distant begin to feel proximate. The team is firing on all cylinders. The clients are responding. The numbers are moving. And there's a quality of forward motion that feels almost effortless after all the effort it took to generate it. But here's what that feeling does not mean. It does not mean that the work is done. It does not mean that the systems can be relaxed. It does not mean the discipline that created the momentum is no longer required now that the momentum exists. If anything, momentum requires more intentionality than the seasons that preceded it. Because momentum, when it's misread as arrival, is the most common setup for the fall that follows the peak. And I want to say that again because it's the pivot point of this entire conversation. Momentum is not something to ride. It's something to replicate. When we ride momentum, when we celebrate it, right? We put our hands up, we're like, woohoo, we made it. When we have that mentality as leaders, it implies completion. It implies that the thing that has been it applies that the thing has been achieved and it is now appropriate to pause to receive the reward. But momentum is not a completed achievement. It's an active condition. Momentum is an active condition that requires active management to sustain. The moment you shift from managing it, leading momentum, navigating momentum to celebrating it, the moment the hands come off the bar, so to speak, you've already begun the process of losing it. Replication, on the other hand, asks a completely different set of questions. Not what did we achieve here, but what created this? Now, not how do we enjoy this, but how do we sustain and extend it? Not how can we relax, but what must we now protect? Those questions are the work of the leader who understands that momentum is a resource to be stewarded rather than a trophy to be displayed. So let's talk about what gets you there. Let's start at the beginning of the roller coaster because understanding the climb is essential to understanding what the peak actually represents. The climb, as you know, if you've ever been on a roller coaster, that click, 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 where you almost feel like you're moving up, but back a little, back a little. The climb is long, it's slow, it's grinding. It's the unglamorous season of building. The consistent content when no one is watching. The outreach when the response rate is low. The team development when the results are not yet visible. The habit maintenance when the motivation has gone quiet. Every click of the track upward during the climb is a deposit into skill, credibility, and into the compound interest of consistent action that eventually, over time, produces momentum. During the climb, right? If you've been on a roller coaster, your hands aren't up on the climb. They are on the bar. You're literally holding on for dear life because you're not really sure what to expect and you're kind of anxious and excited. During the climb, the bar is everything. Your systems, your personal production, your leadership habits, your growth mindset, you hold them tightly because the climb requires it. The discipline is not optional. It's the mechanism of ascent. And the person who maintains their grip on the systems, the habits, the personal production, the growth mindset, the person who maintains their grip through the entire climb is the person who arrives at the top with something that the casual rider does not have, the knowledge built from experience of what exactly got them there. That knowledge is what makes management of the peak possible. You see, you cannot replicate what you didn't track. You can't protect what you don't understand. The climb is not just the path to momentum, it's the education on how to manage it. The peak of the roller coaster is where the first character test lives, and it's the most seductive one. It's the ego test. Momentum feels like proof. It feels like validation of everything you believed about yourself and your vision during the seasons when the evidence was thinner. And that feeling, the intoxicating sense of justified confidence, is beautiful and completely earned. You did the work. You maintained the discipline. You held the bar through the whole climb. The momentum is real and it's yours. The ego test asks, can you receive that validation without letting it rewrite the story of how you got there? Can you feel the confidence of the peak without concluding that the systems and habits and disciplines that created the climb are now less necessary because you've clearly arrived? Can your ego take a win without inflating to the point where it begins making decisions that the humbler, hungrier version of you never would have made. The antidote to the ego test is not false modesty. It is the deliberate, humble recognition that momentum is a product of process and that the process does not take a victory lap. It keeps running. After the peak, right? So you're riding the roller coaster up, you're at the peak, you go on that first downward spiral, or downward fall, and then the first curve arrives. And the curve is not a warning sign of failure. It's a normal, inevitable feature of every momentum season. The moment where conditions shift, where the approach that produced the peak requires adjustment for the terrain ahead, where what worked at the top of the track needs to be recalibrated for what the track is now doing. The curve tests humility. Specifically, it tests whether the leader who experienced the peak is willing to acknowledge that the conditions have changed and that what got them here may not be exactly what carries them through what is next. The leader who passes the humility test asks, what is this curve telling me? What is this curve teaching me? What micro adjustment does this moment require? What do I need to learn, adapt, or let go of in order to navigate this new section of the track? The leader who fails the humility test insists that what worked at the peak will work everywhere. They attribute the curve to external factors. They defend the approach rather than examining it, and they discover, with increasing frustration actually, that momentum does not reward rigidity. It rewards the leader who is responsive enough to adjust while holding the bar. The leader who is responsive enough, the ego test, the humility test. Don't get so stuck in your ways that your team growth and production and movement forward gets stuck in the way of it all. The loop, right? The loop-de-loop that you go on, the upside down part where you know it's coming and it's really exciting and you kind of lose a sense of gravity for a split second. The loop is the most demanding section of the track. The moment where everything that was right side up is now inverted. How many of us have been there? Everything was going great and now it feels like your whole world got flipped upside down in business. Where the pressure is highest and the disorientation is greatest and the instinct to release the bar is the strongest. In a season of momentum, the loop actually looks like the unexpected setback that arrives in the middle of a strong run. The key team member who departs, the market shift that disrupts the approach that was working, the public stumble in a season of visible success, the leadership decision that does not land the way it was intended. You see, the loop tests integrity and emotional maturity simultaneously. Integrity because the leader who is navigating a setback in a public momentum season has a choice about how they show up, whether they maintain the values and the standards and transparency that characterize the climb, or whether they quietly revise the story to protect the perception of the peak. As I am saying that out loud to you right now, oh my gosh, aha moment of some leaders I have worked with in my past who did just this. Wow. Whether they quietly revise the story to protect the perception of the peak. Interesting. I'm just having a moment. Thanks for letting me have that moment. And it tests emotional maturity because the loop activates every fear and every ego protection mechanism available. And the leader who manages their internal experience through the loop without projecting it onto the team, without making reactive decisions, without letting the disorientation of the inverted moment override the wisdom of their established process, is the leader whose team comes through the loop with their confidence intact. Momentum doesn't just test your strategy. It tests your character. It tests the ego at the peak, the humility at the curve, and the integrity through the loop. These are the real metrics of a leader who knows how to manage what they have built. So now you might be asking, how do you actually manage momentum? And I'm going to tell you how. Keep your hands on the bar. Protect the process. The single most important momentum management practice is the simplest to state and the hardest to maintain. Do not relax the process that created the momentum just because the momentum has arrived. And I see this so often in young leaders, developing leaders, or leaders who are experiencing momentum and winning and rank advancing and climbing. When they're experiencing that, I see this happen all the time. They hit that rank, they get to that position, the numbers are producing, and they back off of the very habits and actions and decisions that actually got them there in the first place. They back off from the very thing that got them there. If you use the accelerator in your car to get to your destination and you want to go to another destination, you have to get back on the accelerator, right? Well, if you take your foot off the gas, what happens? You stop moving. So you can't relax the process that created the momentum just because the momentum arrived. That means the daily disciplines, the weekly rhythms, the team accountability structures, the personal production habits, these are the bar. They do not become optional in a season of momentum. They become even more important because they are now the mechanism of extension rather than the mechanism of creation. Audit your process at the peak of every momentum season and ask, what am I most tempted to ease up on right now? A lot of times what I see happening is people are like in the trenches, they're having conversations, they're inviting people to take a look at their product or their business opportunity or whatever the case may be. They're in like a high production mode. And then they get a handful of new customers and a handful of new people on their team, and they're getting and going and growing and doing all the things, and they back off of the very activities that were increasing their personal production. And then they wonder why their personal production has slowed. So you got to ask yourself, what am I most tempted to ease up on right now? Okay, I'm at the peak. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. What am I most tempted to ease up on right now? And then double down on it. The temptation is almost always pointing at the exact thing that needs to be protected the most. Momentum seasons require heightened awareness, not relaxed attention. The leader who keeps their eyes open through a momentum season is tracking what is working with enough precision to replicate it, noticing the early signals of the curve before they become dramatic shifts, and making the micro adjustments that keep the forward motion consistent rather than waiting until the deviation is large enough to demand a major correction. Build a simple weekly momentum review into your leadership practice during high momentum seasons. 3 questions. What is driving the current forward motion right now in our team, in our business? What is driving the current forward motion? What early signal, if any, suggests an adjustment is needed? And what one thing do I double down on this week to extend the momentum's duration? The counterintuitive truth of momentum management is that the appropriate response to a strong season is to not ease the throttle. It's to increase it deliberately, strategically, and with full awareness of what you're doing and why. The leader who doubles down at the peak of momentum is leveraging a window that will not remain open indefinitely. Remember what I said at the very beginning. Momentum is a season. It's a moment. You hear the word momentum? It's a moment. Don't stop doing what you were doing. It's a moment. Double down on the things that are working. It's a moment. What do we need to protect to continue to extend this? Momentum. It's a moment. Don't get caught up. It's a moment. Don't get Twitter pated. It's a moment. It's not going to last forever. Remember, business ebbs, business flows. There are highs and there are lows. There are peaks and there are valleys. It is not a straight line. It is not an upward infinite curve. That is not how anything works realistically. And if somebody is telling you that it does, they're a liar. And as I just heard in church this last week, my pastor say, liars are friars. So move along, right? So that momentum window isn't going to be open indefinitely. Leaders want to use the energy of the moment to build further, faster, and deeper than would have been possible in a slower season. Celebrating momentum is not a bad thing. It has its place and it is important. As we discussed in the ARC episode, to acknowledge and honor the progress that created the momentum. But celebration is also a moment. Cultivation, on the other hand, is a practice. And in a momentum season, the cultivation, which is the active ongoing tending of the conditions that created the momentum and the intentional extension of those conditions forward, is what determines whether the momentum season becomes a chapter or a career. You want to cultivate the team rhythms that are producing results. Cultivate. Tend to the conditions of the rhythms that are producing results. Cultivate the client relationships that are generating referrals. Cultivate the personal disciplines that are sustaining your leadership capacity. Cultivate the mindset that says this is not luck and it is not a fluke. This is the compound interest of what I've been building, and if I tend it well, it will continue compounding. Momentum, again, is not something that you ride. It's not something that it is something that you manage, not something that you stop to celebrate, something you lean into, cultivate, and extend. The difference between those two approaches is the difference between a moment and a movement. I want to close today by talking a little bit about identity, because I think that is ultimately what this episode, and honestly, this entire conversation over these last handful of episodes has really been about. We've talked about, what it means to push with precision. We've built process as the architecture of progress. We've made the mind shift from deficit to desire. We've learned to activate, replicate, and celebrate the people that we lead. We've deepened our coachability. And now in this final conversation, not final, I'm not going anywhere, but in terms of the development of these last few episodes, we've reframed momentum from something that happens to you into something you actively, intentionally, skillfully manage. All of that teaching really does point toward the same thing, and it's a particular kind of leader, a particular kind of person, really, someone who is not simply reactive to the seasons of their journey, who does not simply endure the slow climbs and then abandon the discipline when the peak arrives, but someone who approaches every phase of the journey with the same intentional, eyes open, hands on the bar presence. Someone who has learned that the quality of their leadership is not determined by whether momentum arrives. It is determined by what they do when it does. That person does not just throw their hands up at the peak. They hold the bar with informed confidence. They keep their eyes open through the curves. They lean into the loops with integrity, and they come out on the other side of every section of the track having learned something about themselves and about the work that makes the climb both, more intentional and more productive. That is the leader who manages momentum rather than rides it. And that leader is not some distant aspirational figure. That leader is who you are in the process of becoming, who you, as a listener, yes, you, you're like me, yes, you. That leader is who you are in the process of becoming through the work that you have done, the disciplines you've built, the frameworks you've internalized, and the commitment that you have made to building something that is not dependent on luck or perfect conditions, but on the depth of the roots and the strength of the process underneath it all. The roller coaster is going to keep coming. The climbs, the peaks, the curves, the loops, they're all a part of the journey, and none of them are optional. What is optional, however, is whether your hands are on the bar when they arrive. Keep them there. Every section of the track, every season, because the leader with their hands on the bar is not just surviving the ride, they're mastering it. And mastery, the kind that comes from showing up fully at every point of the track, is what you've been building toward all along. So let's take a moment to reflect on where you are when it comes to momentum. Where are you on the track right now? Are you on the climb? Are you in the peak? Are you navigating a curve? Or are you working through a loop? And what does your current season specifically require of you in terms of how you're holding the bar? Which of the 4 tests, ego, humility, integrity, emotional maturity, is your current season asking the most of? What's being tested right now? Ego, humility, integrity, emotional maturity. What would it look like to pass that test with the kind of grace and intentionality that makes the season formative rather than just difficult? And lastly, think of a past momentum season you've experienced. Were you managing it or were you just riding it? What did you do with your hands when the peak arrived? Did you let go of the bar or did you double down, identify what you need to protect, and extend on what you were building? So where were your hands when the peak arrived? And knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently? More importantly, what will you do differently next time when momentum arrives? As I send you back to your day, I want you to know that the work that you are doing, it matters. The vision that you are carrying matters. The people that you are leading, the habits you are building, the mind shifts you are making every single day, the momentum you are leaning into and learning to manage, all of it matters. And it's all connected because the leader who knows how to push with precision, who has built a process that leads to progress, who thinks in terms of what they want rather than what they're escaping, who activates and replicates and celebrates the people around them, who stays coachable through every season, and who keeps their hands on the bar even when the ride is extraordinary. That leader is not a rare type. They are a built type. And you, my friend, are building towards that. That is the most important thing that I can say. Not that you have arrived, not that the journey is complete, but that you are building deliberately, intentionally, one decision and one disciplined day at a time. The kind of leader whose best seasons are always ahead of them rather than behind them. Thank you for joining me here on Brewing Success. Why don't you take a moment, share this episode with 3 leaders in your circle who need this lesson or gentle reminder. Share your insights on social media, leave a review, and of course, shoot me a DM if you want to chat more on this topic. Thank you for joining me here on Brewing Success, where growth is the mission, change is the reward, and of course, progress is the goal.